there's an award too, don't worry. And we're really excited about these. We have so much fun making these awards every year. In the past, we've done a custom cast iron skillet that we've given our awardees. We've done art print from a local artist that we worked with, which was really fun. But for the past couple of years, we've worked with this really cool local maker who is in the room here with us tonight, Stephen Knurr. Thank you for your work. We've worked with Stephen for the past 3 years, and he's 3D printed M's for us before. But this year we wanted to do something a little different, and he's created this awesome award that's up on your screens over here that's color changing. Yeah, very fun. Yeah, evolutionary, you might say. But this award would not be possible without our sponsor, MG&E, so thank you to them for being an award sponsor. But we don't have, yes, thank you. But we also have another award from our other award sponsor, Kendra Scott. We're giving away a charm that's up on your screen here that's a little M for M-List. So we're super excited. You guys deserve this. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Andy. So I guess we'll begin. And please welcome to the stage our first honoree this evening, the LOCA Initiative. And accepting this award is Dakila Chungyalpa, Executive Director of the LOCA Initiative.
The LOCA Initiative through Tia Nelson, the Managing Director of the Outlier Foundation. Tia described the LOCA Initiative as a global effort that brings together religious leaders, scientists, and environmentalists to find solutions to climate change. Through Tia, I met Dakila Chungyalpa, the Executive Director of LOCA. Dakila was planning a global summit in Madison and was seeking participation from Native tribes in Wisconsin. 3 things struck me about her. Her recognition that Indigenous people need to be part of the solution. Her determination in making sure Indigenous women had a prominent role in sharing their wisdom at the summit. And her respectful approach toward bringing Native people into the conversation. Dakila herself is an Indigenous person who grew up in the Himalayas. She knows what it's like to be left out of important conversations that impact her own people. She's a forward thinker and an innovator. For these reasons, I nominated the LOCA Initiative for the M-List Award.
Congratulations, Dakila.
Thank you.
Yes. So let me start off this relay conversation with something that I'm curious about. Where did you grow up? And in answering this question, please describe the place where you grew up, how it shaped who you are, and how it has influenced your work.
So I grew up in a very remote, wild area in the Himalayas. It's a little sliver of land between Nepal and Bhutan. It's called Sikkim. And I am the daughter of a Tibetan Buddhist nun who was a teacher of Tibetan Buddhism. So I traveled with her in very remote parts of the Himalayas as part of my relationship with her. And I suppose was trained partly to, in my spiritual tradition, you know, being her body attendant. That's really what it's called. Sikkim, so my community is called Bhutia. We're a scheduled tribe in India. We have a mountain called Kanchenjunga, and it's a sacred mountain for us. It's a living deity. And Kanchenjunga is the 3rd highest peak in the world, but most of you probably have never heard of it, because to this day, Kanchenjunga has never been climbed. So for my people, this idea of climbing and planting a flag on top of our spiritual protective deity is just sacrilege. However, when I came to the West to study, you know, there was this schism that happened where everything I believed as a Bhutia woman, you know, from my community, all of these traditional beliefs I had to be put aside for me to be taken seriously as a scientist. So I worked in field conservation, and here I am, an Indigenous woman trying to prove that not only do women have a place in conservation, but Indigenous women can work in other parts of the world, not just where they come from. It's a particular barrier that Indigenous women have. And I found myself really suffering and struggling with the schism. So when I began working with faith leaders, it wasn't something I planned, it was very organic. The head of my Tibetan Buddhist lineage, his name is the Karmapa. I had a meeting with him and he said, can you help me come up with environmental guidelines for the monasteries and nunneries? And he has hundreds of monasteries and nunneries that are under him, that are spread all across the Himalayas and the Tibetan Plateau. And I thought, great, this is really good for my future karma. My next lifetime is secured. I thought, it's just 2 weeks of vacation, I can put this together. But in the process, there was this both a professional and personal transformation that happened. So professionally, the scientist in me was watching how people were being motivated to change their attitude and behavior. It was phenomenal. At that time, I was running the WWF US program for the entire Greater Mekong, which was, these massive 5 countries, and we couldn't get them to care enough about climate change and adaptation. We're begging people to work together, right? And here there are a group of religious leaders who really have had very little exposure to science, who the moment they realize that climate change is going to cause suffering, step forward to say, I am going to help solve this problem. So the scientist in me was going, how come nobody's working with faith leaders? And then on the personal side, the vulnerable side, it was the first time those two, that painful division got brought together and got healed. So I didn't plan to work with faith leaders, but it was the best gift that I received.
Oh, that is great. Could you talk a little bit about the LOCA initiative and what work that you do with the initiative, and what do you see as the future? What can it be?
So the LOCA initiative is, I would say, a convening and a capacity platform for faith leaders and indigenous leaders. We want it very much to be grounded here in Madison, so a lot of our partners are local. But at the same time, it has a global vision because of the issues we're working on is global by nature. It's a partnership all across the University of Wisconsin-Madison. One of our partners is right there, Jonathan Patz, who heads the Global Health Initiative and is representing the Nelson Institute. But the best part about LOCA for me is that it is a two-way process of sharing education, knowledge, wisdom, all of those things that we have thought for a very long time belongs in the field of science and Western science in particular. But actually what LOCA does is opens that barrier for us to talk about other things that matter, spiritual values that motivate us, right? All the things that we care about when we come home, the role of women leaders, So it opens all of those barriers and allows people into the room that are often left out of these dialogues. LOCA especially focuses on indigenous peoples because we know, for example, in the US, most of the environmental racism, all of the negative climate impacts are going to affect people of color and indigenous communities first and the worst, and among them women and children. So it's not just part of the goal, it is part of the strategy that we bring them to the same table that powerful decision makers are at. We have several aspects to LOCA, some of which is around convening and providing capacity building, like I said. However, there are other aspects that might be of interest to all of you. We are starting to look at climate anxiety in particular. This is a phenomenon that was just recognized by the American Psychological Association as a real thing. Many of us have probably experienced it, but now we've got the stamp. And one of the things for LOCA being based in the Center of Healthy Minds, which is headed by Dr. Richard Davidson, is that that's exactly what the center has been doing for a long time. They've been studying how mental well-being is a skill that can be taught, that can be practiced and improved. So what LOCA is doing is connecting that mental well-being piece at a personal level to the community level, to the planetary level. And what we're saying is resilience is a skill that you can have at an individual level, a community level, and a planetary level, and we can teach it.
Wow. And the future, what do you see?
Ooh. So part of examining climate anxiety, we're working on a book because a lot of the response we've had, especially from the youth, is that they are struggling with what the implications are for them. It's hard for them to deal with the future. There's a ton of research that tells you that climate is going to affect mental health in particular. So we're starting to look at what that means in terms of how we can gain wisdom from spiritual traditions, from indigenous traditions, and apply that kind of skill, that kind of knowledge, that kind of wisdom back to heal people.
We have just like a minute or two left. Could you talk about Loka? I think I was really fascinated the first time that I heard what that meant in your language.
Loka is a Sanskrit word. It was supposed to be a placeholder, and then everybody loved it, and it just kept, we kept it. Loka is interesting because Sanskrit is a very ancient language, and from it, many other languages have come. So my language, Tibetan, actually, and Sikkimese, comes from Sanskrit, just as Hindi does. Very different sounding languages. Loka has this meaning which means it's a doorway, but it's also a world, and it's also many worlds, all at once. So when you use the word Loka, depending on how you use it, you're using it as an entry point into one or many worlds. And it can be as large as an individual, so the world that is within us, versus the world that all of us are in. And to us, it seemed really, it was really poignant the first time I understood what it meant. And I thought, okay, when we talk about a vision that brings everybody together, that brings spirituality together with the science, that heals that divide between spirituality and science, what could be better than a doorway, right, that enters into many worlds. So.
Oh, that's very good. Thanks so much, Tequila. And congratulations again.
All right. Our next honoree this evening is Madam. Accepting this award is Winnie Karanja, founder and executive director of Madam.
Hi, Winnie.
Hello.
Nice to see you again.
Yes.
So,
And we have a short intro. We have a short intro that we'll play right now about Madam. Winnie Karanja was featured a few years ago in Madison Magazine's January 2017 issue about the 20-somethings of Madison. But describing her as a 20-something didn't quite cover it. We featured her because she had already accomplished so much in her 2 decades of life. She's trilingual, she has life experiences across the globe. Oh, and she founded her own nonprofit with the mission to diversify the technology sector. As executive director of Madam, Karanja and her staff help train primarily girls and students of color in coding and programming. Since that feature in 2017, Madam has gone from 1.5 full-time employees to 5, and they have served an additional 600 students. By the end of this year, they will have brought the number of students who have gone through their programs to 900. Madam's reach is expanding and actively changing the face of STEM fields. We're honored to award Madam with the 2019 M-List Award.
congratulations.
Thank you so much.
So can you tell me a little bit about what motivated you to focus on girls and youth of color in particular?
Yeah, so what kind of motivated me to focus on girls and youth of color is because I learned how to code when I was in high school. And in my classroom, I was one of the 2 girls and one of 2 students of color. And as I continued to enter into these tech spaces, I started to realize that that continued to happen. I was one of the few. And the opportunities that technology afforded me to be able to work on really amazing projects, to travel the world, to just expand my horizons, I knew that other people who looked like me needed to have those same opportunities. So, yeah.
And what has been the impact of Madam that you are most happy about?
I would say the impact that I'm most happy about is just the moments when our students are writing a line of code and they get it to work. And they're like, Miss Winnie, I got my picture up there, you know? Or like, it actually works. So those moments are really powerful because I think one of the biggest things is just the underrepresentation of women and people of color in the tech field. And so to see my students embody the world that I want, I want our tech departments to look more like me. I want them to be diverse. I want them to look more like our community. And those moments when I have our students go to the aha moments, or when they've been working on some code and they've been debugging it and then it finally works and they're like, I get it, like I can do this. This is a space for me. Those moments are so powerful. And to even just see students say, this is what I want to do. I want to become the next engineer. I want to become the next computer scientist and developer working at a local company. That's been powerful.
And where do you see Madam going forward?
So I see Madam doing a lot of different things. I would say for me at a very sort of visionary and philosophical level, I see us helping change what is the thought around where brilliance and talent lies, especially in the tech field. And I really see our students going from the programs that they're doing with us. So we work with rising 6th through 12th grade students, and seeing those students go into college and university in STEM fields, seeing them go into work, into the workforce. And so as we continue to grow, it's continuing to grow programs and getting paid internships for our high school students, getting college credit for our students, and really becoming a pillar in the community around what's STEM and just even the vision of the way that our workforce looks like.
So I know we talked about this earlier. It's really easy to gloss over how difficult the process was. So can you tell us a little bit about what kind of obstacles you faced creating this and how you overcame them?
Yeah, so there was obstacles. I would say as an entrepreneur, you're always kind of like going this uphill space and learning and discovering. And I would say for us, it was more just about getting people to really see the importance of the work that we were doing. A lot of it was working with schools, like learning that schools operate at a whole different calendar than regular. So we were having to think about like things 6 months in advance. For in terms of programming, I would say battles was just trying to figure out who are the right partners, how do we continue to have sustainability in our programs, and also because there's just such a need and interest, like which neighborhoods do we work with first, and then how do we continue to have our students growing and engaging, not just with us, but to connecting them with other resources. I think just what you don't know is what you don't know, and so being able to figure out how do we find that out and then connect our students with that. With it, there's, as an entrepreneur, there's the challenges of, funding and, all different types of things like that. And as it was said in the clip, we started in 2017, we had, a staff of 1.5 full-time people. I don't know how you have half a full-time person, but somehow we did it. But now we have a team of 5. So I would say we're continuing to just go through that battle of ensuring that people understand the importance of why diverse talent, diverse thought, and the importance of that is something that we continue to have conversations about. And my goal is that in the future we wouldn't need to have that, because that will become just like a known thing.
What does Madam mean?
So that's a question I get quite often. Madam is not an acronym. It is actually a play on sound around the phrase made by them. So nationally, the US technical workforce comprises of 22% women and then 3 to 4% Blacks or Latinx. And so for me, I wanted to have more technical products that are built by women, that are built by people of color. And so hence, made by them, Madam. That's where the name emerges from. So.
I have one final question. We talked about this too. What do you think are the characteristics that make you an entrepreneur?
I would say probably the one that comes to mind is just perseverance and tenacity. You have to be able to, keep just fighting, keep doing, keep pushing. having that vision and seeing it through, I would say, is one of the biggest characteristics, because you're going to have roadblocks and it'll feel like you've gone 5 steps ahead and then like 3 steps back, and just not letting that be something that causes you to fall into despair. There are those moments where you realize like, oh, like we have to figure out a new strategy. But I would say tenacity is a big one. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now Winnie is going to become our interviewer in this relay conversation. Thank you so much, Tequila. Please welcome to the stage our next honoree this evening, Harambe Village. Accepting this award is Tia Murray, the co-founder of Harambe Village.
The word Harambe in the Swahili language means let's pull together. This powerful word describes the essence of the nonprofit organization Harambe Village, whose mission is to pull together the local community to help improve health outcomes for mothers and babies while also promoting health equity. Based on the mother-centered model of maternity care, Harambe Village focuses on enhancing the childbearing experience, empowering women by promoting support from doulas, and providing access to education. The organization also engages stakeholders around health and racial equity work and has created safe spaces for mothers of color and community members to talk about issues that are important to them. This program model combines culturally appropriate peer-to-peer support in the perinatal year and the early months of parenting. It represents a new approach to perinatal support, one that makes use of the power of relationships and the power of birth. Through this community approach of pulling together, the organization has earned a 2019 M-List Award.
Congratulations to the team at Harambe Village. Yes. So my first question to kind of kick off our conversation is, what led to you starting Harambe Village?
I always feel like that's such a loaded question because of the work that we do. It's really a combination of life experiences in addition to being born and raised in Madison, seeing the ups and downs of programs and initiatives that don't quite get us to where we want to be. I grew up at the knees of women like Betty Banks and Hershey Barnett Bridges, whom my mother worked with. And so really, I considered myself my mother's sidekick. We would protest at the Capitol, we would work for this nonprofit and that nonprofit. And so it was really a culmination of witnessing the work that my mother did in the community with other community leaders, my personal experiences birthing 5 babies, and really wanting to do something about a problem and not continue to talk about it, because we're really good about talking about problems in Madison and Dane County, but sometimes we can't quite figure it out. And so Tamara and I were really sick of hearing about the issue, and we wanted to create something that would begin to combat the issues that we were seeing, particularly racial disparities in maternal and child health.
So I know that you started Harambe Village kind of after there was a center that had closed down due to lack of funding. So as an entrepreneur, I know the idea of starting something and kind of having looked and seen that there wasn't funding to keep that going. How did that impact the model that you decided to go with, and even your decision to start Harambe Village?
That's a great question. It impacted it quite a bit. You've heard the saying that we can learn from history. And when the Harambe Family Enhancement Center existed, from about the late 80s, early 90s to about 2010, we saw the deepest decline in Black infant mortality and Black preterm birth in Dane County that made national news. And that was in about 2007. And so I think it really spoke to the work that was being done, particularly for Black and brown families, and the model that was used at that center. And Interestingly, when the center closed, we saw a spike in Black infant mortality and preterm birth again. And now here we are, we find ourselves the worst in the nation for Black infant mortality. That's really telling. And so before we were the worst in the nation, Tamara and I were already trying to do some of that work to bring back that model that the Harambee Center used, and really build on that history and build on the work that had already been done.
Yeah, and so in terms of thinking about that continuation and the whole idea of even like legacy, what is one or two things that you carry from that center into Harambee Village now?
Oh, that's such a good question. You know, it's probably the intergenerational, the multi-generational work that we do. You know, we work with mothers and babies. That's really twofold. So we're not just touching one generation, right? One life. We're touching several. And really supporting infant health is really supporting community health, right? And family health. And so I think that intergenerational work that we're doing, I grew up at the Family Enhancement Center. I used to go to some of their programming with my mother, who was a single mom. And so seeing the benefits, feeling the benefits personally, seeing the work that they're doing, and continuing that on, I think is the legacy, that intergenerational community mothering, as Miss Betty would call it.
And so my last question for you is, what does it mean to be an evolutionary?
Oh, goodness. That's a good question. I never, you know, when you're doing this hard work in the community, when you're a social entrepreneur, you're not always looking for recognition or consider yourself evolutionary or innovative. You're really following a passion and meeting a need in the community. And so I think you have to be passionate, right? And you have to be determined, because as you were talking about being an entrepreneur, it takes a lot of persistence. There's barriers, there's roadblocks. We essentially created a whole new model of doing doula work in the community, right? And a new way of looking at supporting maternal and child health, particularly in the Black community. So I think it's being creative and innovative.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Winnie.
And thank you, Michaela and Tamara are here tonight too. Thank you guys for being here from Harambee.
Yes, thank you.
Our next honoree tonight is Shiva Bidar. And please also welcome back to the stage Annette Miller, who will be presenting this award on behalf of Madison 365.
For Shiva Bidar, innovation in diversity and inclusion isn't about high-tech solutions or new inventions. What matters is getting the money where it needs to be. Shiva is Chief Diversity Officer at UW Health, President of the Madison Common Council, and member of more boards and commissions than we have time to list. She has led both UW Health and the City of Madison to get money into the hands of the organizations who are really doing the work, without distracting from their work through a lot of onerous requirements. Shiva has led UW Health to implement what she calls trust-based giving, making donations to organizations that are doing the real work for racial equity with no strings attached. She also led the way to create the City of Madison's Emerging Opportunity Program, which provides seed funding for small nonprofit organizations. Shiva is a tireless advocate for immigrants and communities of color across Wisconsin.
Thank you.
So they gave me the tough interview.
They gave me the top interviewer. So we agree, right?
You have so many accomplishments in respect to diversity and inclusion. I wasn't quite sure where to start, but I guess building off of some of what I was talking about, you're very well aware of the Harambee Family Enhancement Center that used to exist in Madison, and the work that they did in respect to diversity and inclusion. Could you tell me a bit more about your connection to that and how, if any, that has influenced the work that you're doing today?
Thank you for that question. And it's just really amazing for me to be in a room today with Betty and Hershey and talk about Harambee, South Madison Health and Family Center. That was a vision that they had, and I felt lucky when I started my work in the community to find myself connected with South Madison Health and Family Center, and eventually become actually the board president of our board, and really try to advocate for this organization that was doing amazing work, that was actually at its time revolutionary and evolutionary, and that was not being recognized by the community as being what it was. We found ourselves before city council meetings advocating for funding for this organization and not getting any support for funding for this organization, and the closing of the center because of the lack of really, I would say, partnership and collaboration that was based really on understanding what it meant for communities of color. And blunt as I am, I was going to say that the majority of those decisions are being led by people in positions of power and privilege that were not people of color, who were not really understanding how this was happening and not trusting the people that were at the front line making it happen. And that was actually, I think, the process and the event that pushed me to want to do more in this community and want to be more outspoken in this community.
That's wonderful. And as we know, this work isn't easy, right, Shiva?
No, it's not.
And you're really flipping the head in respect to how we provide resources, allocate resources and funding to community organizations and such. What inspires you to continue to fight for that mission?
So there are many things that inspire me every day, actually. The people in this room inspire me. The colleagues that I have sitting at tables 5, 6, and 7 inspire me every day to keep going, because it's not an individual work, it's really a collective work that we're doing. I don't feel ever alone in the work that I do. I always feel that there is people who are there collaborating, partnering, and also pushing me, telling me when I'm not doing enough, when I'm not, when maybe I'm becoming a little bit too vanilla, sorry, and really being my conscience and letting me know that I can do it and that I should really be true to myself. So I think it's a collective work. When I was watching the video and I was hearing about our trust-based giving, that's not me. It's really a whole group of people. Robin Langton, Julie Alec, who are in this room, who were really the big pushers and allies in doing this work. So I think it's a collective of all of us. And I would say every night when I go to sleep, and those of you who know me well know that I don't sleep a lot. I wake up thinking about a new idea at 2 a.m. and kind of, send emails about it. But when I try to go to sleep, I always remember the voices of my grandmothers and their dreams for a world in which we women of color had the ability to really be in charge. And that's what I always see myself, is like, I need to be true to that dream.
Wow, that's really powerful. I'm curious, in the next year, if there was one thing that you would like to see happen in respect to diversity and inclusion, what would that be?
One thing. Wow, that's a...
Or many, several.
It's a very difficult question. If it was like all in my power
all
to
Shiva.
do, I'm going to honestly say that I would want to see the Harambe rebirth. And the Harambe rebirth would probably, the place that it would be now, it would be at the East Madison Community Center with the work that Betty and you are doing, because I can see it coming together. So, Phoenix from the ashes.
That's wonderful. My other question for you, my last question is, you know, as I mentioned, you really flipped the head on how we are allocating resources and things like that. Your article really highlighted that. Why do you think we haven't always done it that way? Or why is that a new way of doing things? Why haven't we quite gotten that right?
I really think that the reason we haven't done it is because the structures that we're creating around funding are structures that are based on power and privilege. And so creating all these barriers that were created, you have to write the grant, and then there's these people that evaluate this grant. It's all this like secret backroom kind of processes that are going on around who's making the decision, are you in or are you out? And are based on really assimilation of, you know, do you belong or you don't belong? It was really part of the way that we've created over so many decades our processes of giving and funding, and have perpetuated it. And so I think the changes that we're trying to make are really about rethinking why we build those structures and who those structures were serving and who they weren't serving. And how do we trust the people that are on the front line doing the work, that are most connected with their own people in doing what they know how to do best, and not create levels and barriers in doing that work. So,
Thank you for that, and thank you for the work you do. Congratulations.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right, and please welcome to the stage our final honoree this evening, Anik Dupati.
Contemporary art, you may have noticed a bit more vibrancy, not only in the artwork, but in the events themselves. That's due in part to Anik Dupati, Director of Events and Volunteers at MMOCA. In 2018, Anik created an event in which artists displayed their colorfully designed spaces, multi-sensory exhibits, and group art projects. The event, called Chroma, was described as an immersive experience and a celebration of color, how it feels, its intensity and beauty, and the way we use it in our lives. Sabrina Madison, founder of the Progress Center for Black Women, said MMOCA hosted the 2018 Black Women's Conference. She said Anik welcomed us, made us visible to the public, and introduced the participants to MMOCA, because many of the women had never been to the museum. For these reasons and many others, Anik Dupati has earned a 2019 M-List Award.
Congratulations, Anik.
Thank you, and congratulations to you too, Shiva.
Thank you. So I know you grew up in a multicultural family. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that influenced really your life and the work that you're doing today?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So some of you know this that know me. So my dad is African American and Native American, and he grew up in rural Mississippi and then moved north to Racine, Wisconsin. And my mom, who's here today, so she's French, Danish, Norwegian. She grew up in Racine as well, and spent time in France growing up from time to time, and I think of her as a world traveler. And our house was incredibly diverse just in who we were, but not just that, the people that we invited into our home, the people that we spent time with, both sides of our family. When we would have picnics and gatherings and go places. It was really like United Nations coming together. It really was, and I love that. There was, every background that you could imagine brought together in those gatherings, and that was just like a normal part of life. That is how I grew up. Diversity was just a part of who we were. So I bring that, I think, to everything that I do in life, and including the work that I do at AMOCA.
Thank you. So switching gears a little bit, we've all have noticed that you're a big Prince fan. You it was certainly prominent and on the Madison Magazine, and you're wearing it. And I saw you had actually several, one of those buttons that you were giving out. So can you connect that Prince connection and this equity and inclusion? So you told me like Prince was all about equity and inclusion. And I was like, tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think, so there was a Star Tribune article that talked about this. Long before it was cool to be talking about diversity and gender blending and genre blending and music blending and all these buzzwords that we love to use and are so important, he was really doing that naturally, both in his work as an artist, in his persona, in the bands that he developed, and with my background, I think that I was naturally drawn to him and his music. I listened to so many different types of music just in my home between my mother and father, exposing me to so many different things. So that was, I think, sort of natural. He kind of represents like the, I don't know, the beauty of this earth, the way that we can all come together in these unique ways. And yeah, I just love that. When I used to go to his concerts, you would see some of everyone. I'm talking about every age, orientation, race, religion. It's really a beautiful thing, and those gatherings continue, and it's really a special thing. Yeah.
Well, it gives me a whole new perspective in listening to Prince, so thank you.
I have plenty of albums I can share with you.
And some of your buttons, I want some of those.
I give Amy credit for that.
So back to your work at AMOCA. So I know that AMOCA has had some kind of events that they've had for a long time, like Art Fair on the Square and other events. How have you found yourself being able to really embed equity and inclusion in those already existing events that Madison kind of embraces as Madison events?
Yeah, so I grew up in Madison for the most part, and I was going to Art Fair on the Square with my mom. I think we tried to figure this out at some point when I was very young. And so it's kind of surreal sometimes me doing this job and being the person that oversees Art Fair on the Square. Anyway, being the person that I am, the way that I think about things, one of the first things that occurred to me stepping into the role was the people who jury the artists in should have a diverse background. They should be able to look at and evaluate art from a lot of different perspectives. So some of the first things I did was introduce people of color into that jury panel. And I think that has had an impact on the types of artists and the type of work represented over time. That's just one example. Other events that I work on, like Hair Affair, we've reached out to places and people to get them to participate in the event. And I think that most people who've been to Hair Affair in the early days versus what Hair Affair looks like now, that has changed a lot in terms of who we have included in that event, who's participating, who's in the audience, who is having fun at the event. But that's just like a little part of the work we are doing at AMOCA that I think is so important and I'm so proud of.
So my last question for you is, if you were to give a piece of advice to other organizations about how they can really go about including equity and inclusion in their daily work, what would that be?
I have so many thoughts on it, but there's only so much time, and we've already been here for quite a bit. The first thing I would say is that you really have to be intentional. You need to think about it in every aspect of what you are doing in your job, and think about ways that you can have an impact in what you do. When we built Chroma as a team, we were really thinking about bringing new audiences into the museum from, day one of building that event. We actually brought young people in, diverse people in to talk about the event and what they wanted out of it, what they wanted to see. So getting people in the room, getting people at the table to say what they want from a museum experience, and that turned out to be an incredibly beautiful event, one that I'm very proud of. I would also say not everybody has the funds or the ability to have someone in a role as special as yours, a diversity and inclusion officer. But don't let that stop you from doing the work that you need to do in your organization. Each and every person can do some work toward making people feel included. I'm known for my tears.
Big secret, I am too. So don't get me started. I didn't share it in the fun facts, but truth. My brothers know. I cry all the time.
The thing is that I probably won't have an opportunity like this again. So I want to make sure that I use it appropriately. It is very important that we show love and kindness and respect to one another, and it's not actually all that complicated because you learned these things day one of kindergarten. Be nice. Anyone could be a friend. Respect other people, and be open to learning those things. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It is rather distinct, isn't it? As we close, Kendra Scott is selling jewelry at their booth next to the bar. The reason I bring it up is that 20% of the proceeds will go to our honoree organizations tonight, if you want to stop by on your way out. I want to really thank Mayor Satya Rhodes Conway for joining us tonight. I really... It's very meaningful on a lot of levels that you're here. Thank you. That was remarkable. I'm so glad we did that. I loved listening to our honorees. And I guess I just will close by saying that, I mean, this is going to sound ridiculous saying this to you, but I'm aware from having lived here now for more than 40 years how profound a change this community is going through. It feels very historic for me, and there are a lot of people that are resisting it. It's irresistible. This is who we are. And I find that extraordinarily hopeful, extraordinarily positive. This is the community we are, and I say that now that the responsibility of Madison Magazine will be to continue to capture this and the stories that we heard tonight. That's what we're going to do, and I think the community that this is going to become is very, very special. So thank you for celebrating with us tonight. Thank you to our honorees. You're amazing. And thank you for what you're contributing to us and to Madison Magazine. Thank you.